If you're going to be founder, I think one of the most important things is
how someone can move up the ladder, what different that they can do in their journey, so that in a few years you can work as the CEO of some company.
you have to find a problem.
How big is the language translation industry?
The translation market globally is about.
I would love to learn about your journey a little bit.
I started my first company when I was 12 years old. Our customers are companies like IBM, Apple, Disney, Tesla, Pepsi. We help them create.
And with AI coming into picture, especially large language models, are human translators still involved in the process?
Engineers aren't going to lose their jobs with AI.
Microsoft announcing it is laying off about 5% of its workforce.
So entry-level engineers are certainly going to lose their job. How does the data security and the privacy work in the AI world?
Customers own their own data.
So are human translators even involved at all? Thank you so much, Bryan, for taking out time for this podcast. I really, really appreciate it.
Sure, absolutely. Glad to be here.
Awesome. So, Bryan, the objective of this podcast is to learn more about how Smartling is using AI in language translation. Smartling has been in the business for a very, very long time, if I'm not wrong, since 2009. So, I'd love to first understand how the journey of Smartling has evolved over the last many, many years. I'm sure initially you started as a humans assisting in language translation, and then probably machine translation came into picture, then neural machine translation, and now we have large language models. So would love to understand this journey from you.
Yeah, the company actually started out as an application to help companies translate websites, right? So it actually operated as a kind of a content proxy that sat out in front of a website and translated it automatically. And from that evolved into a full-blown translation management platform. So our companies or I should say, our customers are a lot of software tech companies, a lot of global enterprises. So we work for companies like IBM, Apple, Disney, Tesla, Pepsi, Verizon, you name it. We help them create multilingual experiences around the world that customers love. So we're typically localizing websites, software applications, mobile applications, marketing communications, learning and development, et cetera. Anything that needs to be in a host country's language. And I would say that, yeah, so there's two components of localization. One is the sort of like the integration and the automation of that translation, and then there's the translation itself. So you can kind of think of like workflow management. We do both. The big drivers of change in our industry have been starting out with neural machine translation several years ago, right? Allowing us to create faster, cheaper translation, not better, right? And then neural machine translation can be very accurate, but it leaves you with certain linguistic problems. Like you can look at it and you can tell, okay, that was machine translated. AI has been a total game changer in the industry because it allows us to solve very specific linguistic problems for our customers. And basically, to build what we're doing now is we're building custom engines, custom translation engines for each one of our customers that allows us to our customers to be able to basically share their brand voice, their style guide, their glossary, their nomenclature, etc., in any language around the world. And that's sort of like the power of large language models combined with Smartling. That's what enables that sort of technology.
Before we jump more into AI and language translation, would love to know about your journey as well. You started uh, working in different roles and different companies like eBay, and now you're working as a CEO of a company. I think it would be amazing for us to learn like how someone can move up the ladder and what makes what different that they can do in their journey, so that in a few years or after 10 to 15 years you can work as the CEO of some company. So I would love to learn about your journey a little bit.
Yeah, I've always been an entrepreneur, so I really got my start. I started my first company when I was 12 years old, and professionally in my early 20s, and so I think that to be a CEO, there's you have to have this sort of like desire to take it all on your shoulders and have this massive intellectual curiosity around all functions of the business, right? So I think that's something that I've always had, and I think that's kind of like really important to becoming a CEO. But I've had this journey, as a founder, as an entrepreneur, and then also working for large companies like eBay, and they're different. Um, they're very different experiences, but I would kind of break it into two pieces. So if you're going to be a CEO and a founder, I think one of the most important things is you have to find a problem, like identify a problem that a function is having or the world is having or whatever it is, and have a real passion for that. And after you've identified that problem, obviously identify a solution, right? And so that's sort of like that's maybe a third of the battle, because the other part of that, you have to make sure there's a large enough TAM, right? So like, okay, here's this problem. If I solve this problem and I solve it like 10x better than the current methods of doing this thing, is there enough total addressable market for me to turn this into a business? Right. So those are like kind of like maybe the first two thirds, and then the rest of it is execution.
So yeah, that's super helpful, Brian. So you talked about TAM. So let's talk about language translation market. How big is the language translation industry, and what do you think? How much is it expected to grow in the next 5 to 10 years, or
Sure.
has it reached its capacity?
Well, that's a great question. So the translation market globally is about a $26 billion market. So TAM. So it's pretty large. That being said, it grows annually 5-6% or so per year. So a pretty solid, pretty traditional industry. What's happening though is it's going through a massive shift as AI comes into the market, right? And so the easiest way to think about it is if you think about the traditional translation, the language service provider, the translation agency, they're sort of like, the rack rate or customary charge is roughly 20 cents per word. That's sort of like human translation cost. As companies like Smartling come into the market, we're able to do that same translation, provide the same level of quality for a fraction of that cost and a fraction of the turnaround time. So if you look at it that way, you could see, okay, is this market going to go through massive compression? And I think what we've seen is that's actually not been the case, because our customers, our companies tend to ration because of the how slow it is, how difficult it is, how expensive it is to translate. Companies ration how much content they actually translate. They actually have much more content, and content's growing more every year. So as we automate, our customers automate 99% of their translation. We bring that cost down to a fraction of a penny. We we can create the turnaround time to instant versus maybe 14 days, for example. As we're able to do that, our customers translate considerably more content. So in fact, if you look at our customers, we just did this analysis the other day, our customers in the last 36 months are translating actually 3 times more at 60% less cost per word, and in about and about 4x faster than kind of traditional translation providers. So that's like, those are the type of metrics, that get very exciting in the AI application world, right? That's like a 10x, change over the current methodology.
So, Brian, with AI coming into picture, especially large language models, are human translators still involved in the process, or have they moved to other careers? Because I remember from my childhood days, I have an uncle back in India, and I remember back in 2004 and 5, he used to do transcribing services for doctors in the US. And it was a very good source of income for him back in 2004 and 5. And then I remember around 2012 and 13, When I was planning to come to the US, he used to tell me that his work was already reduced almost by 60-70% because of some kind of automation tools that were there. I know transcribing is different from translation, it's not directly related. But he told me like back 10 years ago that it was getting down. So are human translator even involved at all, or what happened to their career?
Yeah. So what's happening is, and it's not dissimilar from coding, right? So I think that I'm going to make a statement, you tell me if you agree with it. That engineers aren't going to lose their jobs with AI, but engineers that can't code with AI are going to lose their jobs.
So entry level engineers are certainly going to lose their job, even if they know how to code with AI. But I think the senior level engineers, mid to senior level engineers, if they can code with AI, certainly they are going to be there. But yeah, I'm worried about the entry level market for sure.
Yeah, I am too across the board because I think we're going to create an air gap there that's going to be challenging. But I think that it's probably similar for translators in that what we're doing is once again our the amount of translation that we're doing is growing. We're actually adding translators to our network because the amount of content is increasing. That being said, the reason for that is because the linguists that we have that we bring into our network, we're training on how to use AI to do that translation. So they're 6, 8, 10 times more productive
Hmm.
than traditional linguists. So I think that very highly skilled translators that know how to use AI to be productive in this new environment are very well positioned. But I think if you're maybe an amateur or maybe not a full time. If this isn't your profession and you're not investing in that, then I think that there's going to be less work for those folks.
Okay. Brian, whenever I talk to founders of well-established companies who have been in the business for last 10 to 15 years, almost all of them told me that they have upgraded their tech to generative AI or large language models, even if they had their in-house uh, trained machine learning models on their own data. Right now, they do not use those machine learning models because LLMs are way more efficient, right? Even in some capacity, and then they have fine-tuned them, those LLMs. Is it true with Smartling as well? Have you upgraded your technology from, say, from 2020 to now using LLM or generative AI?
It's a work in process, right? So one of the strengths of Smartling is for really since its inception, we've been cloud native and we've been leveraging machine learning. So, and neural machine translation, is a form of AI, and we've been heavily involved in that. So when AI, large language models came on the scene, we're pretty familiar with that, right? And our systems were quite adept at utilizing those. So to your point, everywhere we can, we're beginning to replace the old parts of the system with new agentic functionality. So we're kind of starting at the most important places and working our way down where we can drive quality, cost, and speed improvements for our customers. So if you think about it, like Smartling 3 years ago was a translation management platform, right? So that's what it did. It managed the functions of translation. Now it functions more as an AI translation agent that actively observes, decides, and acts on every piece of content that needs to be localized in an agentic way. And most of the major functions now are operating that way, and we're still continuing to build that out. And that's what makes this really interesting and fun.
Just a clarification question and follow-up question on this. So I understand now you have more the agentic framework, right? That's automating and taking care of a lot of work. But say back in 2019 and 2020, I assume you had machine learning models, right?
Yes.
That was doing the translation or some part of translation, if not 100%. Now you have replaced those machine learning models with large language models like ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini. Is that true or is that not true?
No, that's a great question. So I'll give you a perfect example. So we benchmark every month. We benchmark the
Yeah.
large language models for their ability to translate, right? So if you think about, okay, I'm a large language model, right? I'm engineered to do a million things in the world. Okay, you know what I mean? It's a very generic thing. Translation is a very specific thing. Coding, writing code is a very specific thing, right? So what we found is that the large language models today are still not as good as neural machine translation at translating, right? They're getting better, but there's a whole nother conversation around here that they're getting better more slowly, right? If you look at take GPT from 3 to 4.5 to 5, like that pace of change is actually slowing down as I think training material has been absorbed, like kind of been gobbled up. But that being said, they're still not to the point where a large language model is as good as a specifically built neural machine translation engine. That being said, what we do is we combine that neural machine translation engines, right, with AI to do very specific things.
Hmm.
So, for example, it's that combination is quite good. In fact, to be specific, the it's 63% better from a quality perspective
Hmm.
than off-the-shelf large language models. So in other words, the work that we do with it to train the engines, to have it do smoothing, perform certain linguistic tasks, etc., gives you a much higher quality output of translation than just a straight up large language model.
So follow-up question here. So you're saying that out of the box large language models, be it GPT or ChatGPT or Anthropic's Claude, they're not perfect for language translation or not as good as like NMTs. Can you give me an example? Suppose if I take one language, say probably in Hindi or Arabic, right, and ask it to convert to some other language, say Spanish.
Yeah.
Can you give some example where they do blunder? I would love to test it and run it through like multiple large language models and see if how they perform on it.
Yeah, I could actually I could send you some examples. I don't have any off the top of my head of like actual like copy to give you that you could test, but that's actually a great point. So like if you were to and where it really comes into play, let's take a company that cares a lot about their brand, like a technology company, a large global technology company. I won't use a name, but
Hmm.
they have they process, let's say 30 million, they translate 30 million words per month. Okay. Highly complex across 47 different countries. So 47 different languages, with a very large glossary, set of terminology, style guide, translation memory. Okay. All of that is training material that goes into being able to produce a customized on brand accurate translation for that company. So no matter what language it's in, it's going to come out and it's going to be right. The terminology is going to be translated right, correctly, all that kind of stuff. Large language models, as they are standalone, don't have the ability to do that. They also have a tendency, as you probably have experienced, to hallucinate,
Yes, that was my
right?
future question. But yeah,
Right. So
yeah.
if let's say you're a technical documentation writer, right, and you just wrote 5,000 words on a subject, and you need to translate that into 47 languages and use a large language model, you're going to have a bad outcome,
Okay.
right? Because couple things are going to happen. Number one is you're going to probably have a bunch of nomenclature in there that the large language model is not going to be familiar with or understand how to translate into those different languages.
Mm-hmm.
Two, it's going to hallucinate, and we've seen it do all kinds of interesting things. It likes to just make stuff up. Sometimes it reads copy and it takes it as an instruction, right? And so if you just translated it into Hindi or to whatever, like, what did you just write? You have no idea. How do you know what it just wrote? See what I mean? So those are two of the issues. Those are two of the major issues. So what we've done, so that's part of the work that we do, which is to once again train the engines, and then we've also developed hallucination detection and mitigation technology, so that if it does hallucinate, we're very good at detecting it. We also have what we call we have an AI quality agent that um, reviews the translation and ensures that it's correct. If it's not correct, then it actually sends it to a human in the loop to review it and either repair or pass it. So these are some of the steps that we take to make sure that the translations are coming out highly accurately.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. By the way, I'll remind you to provide me some examples that I could test in translation, and I also tried by myself. But if you
Sure.
have something that would be a great learning for anyone who's like getting started with LLMs, because
Yes.
right now, if I give you a general perspective, people think that Chat GPT or LM can do everything. I mean, you give it and they do everything.
Yeah.
There's nothing else that's needed to be done. But when we talk about specific scenarios, that's certainly not true.
Yeah, I think that's I think you're exactly right on that. It is it listen, it's magic, right? It is. It's
Yeah.
an incredible tool. I don't know if you use it to code or to help you code, um, but it's kind of like the same thing. Like it's a great. I use it quite a bit for content development, right? So and it's an incredible partner for me to help to develop content, right? Can I take that content and like not review it and publish it? No, that would not be a good idea. Same thing with probably I suspect with coding, right? It can be a great tool. It's really great at prototyping and all gisting and all those kinds of things. But if you're building an enterprise software application, I don't think very many people are releasing AI code into prod.
Yeah, you can't. There
You,
there are
you,
there are many jokes that you take 5 minutes to write a code from AI and then take 2 hours to fix it.
Uh, yeah. So that's kind of like in the same vibe here. That's not dissimilar from translation. Like it looks like it is amazing at translation because it can translate. Okay, but can it translate to an enterprise quality level? No, not standalone.
Follow-up question on the previous one that we discussed regarding hallucination and the quality of the outcome. Uh, do you utilize any specific tools, or can you recommend any tools to check the quality of the translation from an LLM outcome? Also, what is the process to evaluate if there is much hallucination and you can avoid? So, any tools that people can use, or do you have your inbuilt tools for that?
Yeah, we have a great tool. It's called Smartling.
Okay. Okay.
No, it's complex. Hallucination detection and mitigation is actually one of the more complex tasks that we've taken on. In effect, in its most simplest form, what we're doing is we're comparing the output to the source across a number of different semantic levels. So I'll give you a simple one that's sort of easy to understand. Let's say that I've got a set of text that is 1,000 words long, right? And I'm translating it into German and Spanish. Okay, we know how German and Spanish should behave in its translated form. So, in other words, if it's 1,000 words long, it probably will be 1,300 words long in or it'll have a different number in German and it'll have a different number in Spanish. But we know what those numbers should be over time, or in aggregate. If they're different, right, than what we expect, that's a red flag for our system, and that goes into the metrics that track that, because it's like we kind of know what this thing should look like based on what we've seen across 30 billion words that we've translated and annotated, right? So that's one example. That's just one simple of example. And then we also have other tools that will go in and we'll have other LLMs check that translation and report back on it. So basically, AI checking AI,
Got
and
it.
then we turn that into like sort of like into a metrics driven algorithm that will then go back in and attempt to correct where we found the hallucination, where we detected it, or run it through to a human in the loop to deal with it.
Okay. So is it right for me to say that the RAG form of uh, AI is working very well, because you mentioned you're using your previous machine translations, you're using data, like you have translated like billions of words, right? You're using all those learnings. So the RAG format is basically the right one for language translation.
It 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 is one of them, yes. And as you know, one of the problems is session, right? So how long can we keep something in memory? So that's one of the challenges there is over time, making sure we've got a system that hangs together.
Okay, awesome. Um, just one more question. So you mentioned the Smartling has worked for like almost every big company in the world, right? And they all come from like different sectors. So when you create your engine, whether it's like the previous machine translation one or the new NMT, or if it is the current generative AI engine, so do you fine tune it per customer or domain, or do you rely on like prompt level customization with glossaries and terminologies? How does it work? Like tackling 50 different industries, is it possible to do it in the one way?
Yeah. So yes. So what we tend to do is once again we've seen. I wish we worked with every company in the world. We work with many of the great companies in the world, uh, and there are so there are types of companies. There are verticals, right? There's banking. There's automotive. There's pharma. So we've seen content from all these verticals. We've translated them into 450 languages. Oh, by the way, you just reminded me of one of the things. One of the problems with LLMs is they're pretty good at like kind of like the 12 most popular languages, right? But
Okay.
as they get less popular, there's just less source content for them to train on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's very English centric, right? So it's very English to some other language, but like as you go down that stack, there's less and less training material. So that's one of the issues there. But going back to this idea, so yes, so we have annotated essentially we have like 30 million words that we've annotated in 450 languages across like almost all the major verticals. So we've got a very, very good set of training data that exists today, sort of generically across those language pairs and those verticals. So starting with that. Then each company is its own individual company with their own set of content. So we take that and we sort of merge that with linguistic assets like translation memory, for example. So once we've translated something and we've approved it, it's locked in a database. And every time we see that sentence again, let's say the quick brown fox, we've we don't have to we don't retranslate that, right? Which is a quality improvement and a cost saving. Further to that, we actually do adaptive uh, uh, translation memory using AI. So there's a number of different variants of the quick brown fox that we know are really the same thing. So we can expand that translation memory to that. So that dramatically improves the quality and cost and speed of translation by not having to retranslate it. Um, that's one way. Another way we train is um, with glossary and style guide. So we can go look at corpus of approved content and train the engines on that, right? So that now this machine is this engine is now custom built for that individual company within that vertical to produce highly accurate on-brand translations.
Okay. Okay, that's super helpful. And Brian, what are the benchmarks to select a large language model specifically for language translation? Anything that you guys have identified until now, so that if somebody has to utilize one of the LLMs, right,
Yeah.
then they can go, oh, I should go to Claude. Anything that you would like to recommend here?
Yeah, they as you know, I mean, they're each of the major providers are coming out with a new model on a fairly frequent basis, and so we benchmark those models every month to determine if they've improved. And so we have in effect what we call the golden data set, which is to keep the standard the same. We use the same set of data or content, and we have probably 8 or 9 different tests that we perform against that translation to determine if they, as that engine, how does that engine perform against its competitors? Claude, GPT, etc., Gemini, etc., and versus the last model or the previous models, right? So if you take GPT 3.5, 4, 5, mini, nano, etc., like how did it perform on this specific translation test? And so it moves around quite a bit, remarkably, from month to month. And so that's one of the reasons we actually have an AI agent that when we do a translation, we don't just send it out to one engine. We actually send it out to multiple engines, and then AI selects the highest quality engine's return.
And I'm assuming that this AI agent or the AI engine, you have already fine-tuned it for a particular output. So it checks, okay, which one is giving like the closest output.
That's exactly right.
Okay, awesome. Also, I want to learn about you. So you mentioned that LLMs usually work well for 12 to 14 languages, but there are like hundreds of languages, right? You work with 450-ish languages. Uh, and being in the business for so long, you have access to so much of data and languages. So when you fine tune or you train your model, right, who owns the data? Like, so I'm sure you must have got work in the past, right? And then you have translated it. Do you utilize that data as well to train your model, or do you utilize just the general data? How does it work? Can you utilize? I'm trying to understand how does the data security and the privacy work in the AI world. Uh, can we utilize the data to train the agents or our
Yeah.
model?
Yeah, the that's a good question. The Our customers own their own data, right? We don't own it, and we don't share it. We don't share it with. We have arrangements in place with all the large language models that they're not allowed to use that data to train. And if you look at our website, you can see all the certifications that we have that are placed to be able to do business with globally with enterprise companies. What we do is we're able to. So once again, we build these custom engines for our customers. They own that. They own that custom data in effect. What we have the ability to do is to use that data to learn, to basically train algorithms to improve the quality of data. So it's not the we don't use specific data, but we use the learnings from that specific data, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. And any advice for anyone who's building an AI system regarding uh, how do you host or ensure like the data security? For example, when you get data from an enterprise company, and it's a lot of data, you don't want it to get leaked, right?
Yeah.
What type of measures should people be aware of, right? So that they can secure the data very well, work with that data, and then return it back to their customers. So, what are the guidelines around those data security?
Yeah, that is an area that is past my pay grade to describe. I don't want to
Uh-huh.
I don't want to step into an area that I'm not good at talking about.
Okay, no worries. No, that's absolutely fine. Okay, so also, in your experience so far, you've been with Smartling for the last 3 years. What parts of translation pipeline remain hardest to automate?
We're able to automate 99% of our customers' content. So what we do is we integrate to their brownfield tech stack, their repos. We have APIs that they make available, so they can automate the translation of their products, of their content management systems, of their PIM systems, their CRM systems, etc. Right. So that part of it's done. We are able to automate all of the workflows between those. I think the last mile is the actual translation itself. So, depending on the content type, we can automate 100% of it, but there are definitely elements of it where you've got to have a human in the loop to review the output of that translation, just like you would probably with code. But the I'm trying to think what the number is. We're probably fully automating 60% of the content that we translate. So maybe
Okay.
there's another 40% that's left to be automated, and there's just various forms and functions of that.
So are there domain-specific translation engines as well? For example, a specific engine for like a medical industry or a legal industry. Does it work like
No,
that? No?
no, we have to build those, right? So, um, uh, no, that's exactly right. And typically, what we're doing is we're building it for a company rather than for an industry.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. With LLMs or generative AI coming into picture, it seems like it's easier for any new player to jump into the translation business, implement and come up with their service that, hey, we can do this, and they can probably fine tune their model. Do you think that's true, or have you seen people making mistake over there? Or if somebody wants to start a business in this sector, what would be your advice?
We have not seen a lot of players getting into this space, and a lot of new players. I would say it is you know what makes it complicated? It's not so much the translation itself; it's the workflow automation, right? So if you're working in Adobe, right, or in Figma, and let's say you're working in our customers typically have at least 5 systems and 30 different instances of that across the organization that they are translating for, and they need access to a centralized translation engine, right? That's where most of the cost is, and most of the effort is really in that is in that workflow level, that workflow automation level. And I think that's usually the case with software, right? You've probably experienced that, right? Like most of the work is in getting the systems to talk to each other.
Yep, absolutely. And what's the Smartlink's vision in the future? Are you guys investing in multimodal translation, like translating voice, video, or AR/VR content as well, or just focusing on text content?
Great question. We're actually doing a couple of things right now. We're outside of obviously working to improve the translation itself, but we just released our Smartling MCP server, right? So we
Okay.
definitely think so. Once again, getting back to the idea of systems talking to each other, the MCP server that we just released allows any agentic platform to access the Smartling platform, right? So I can pull back, I can get on custom on brand translation, I can access projects, etc., right? From any of my agentic platforms. The other area that we're really focused on right now in terms of I guess next gen is um, shoot, I just forgot what it was. Uh, it's the MCP server and dang it, it'll come back to me. I just totally blanked.
Regarding MCP that you mentioned, trust me, earlier this week I was working with my product and the development team, and we are building multiple projects to showcase the use of MCP in industry. We built few projects. I'm not sure if your MCP for Smartling is available in N10 or LangChain, but if it is, I would love to give it a shot and create a brief prototype of it.
Yeah, let me check on that. You gave me a couple of things. Let me go check on that because that would be really interesting. See how that's available. I'll find out. Oh, I just remembered what I was going to say. Multimodal, right? So
Mhm.
yes, the answer is so today we do multimodal, right? So we do text, we do video, audio, etc. Learning and development, all those things. It's becoming more and more important, right? So that's an so video the amount of video and audio out there is growing exponentially, so many of our customers have been looking to translate more of that. Once again, in the past it's kind of been slow and expensive, so they've left it alone. With the new technologies that are emerging, it's becoming much more cost effective.
Got it. And do you see in the future AI taking 90% of the translation? Right now, you mentioned it's 60/40, 60% is automated, 40% still human doing it. How much do you see it's getting automated in the future, and what's the timeline that you think?
Yeah, I think that we're going to see that number steadily increase every year. It's hard for me to say when that's going to happen. It's like 2 months ago, I would have said, I think everyone was saying AGI was right around the corner, right? Now I think we're all realizing that maybe not, right?
Uh-huh.
So it's hard for me to forecast the pace of change, but we do see it improving every month. And we also, once again, we see the amount of content coming through dramatically. Our customers have tripled the amount of content that they're translating once again for a fraction of the cost that it was 2 years ago.
Uh, this was super helpful related to how AI is in translation industry, how you guys are using it, and directly coming from someone who's leading like one of the top companies in this sector. So this is super helpful. This is like a gold mine information that you've shared. So thank you so much for that. A few more questions before we wrap up this podcast, Brian. So as a
Sure.
CEO of a company, of a tech company, uh, I'm sure you're occupied in hundreds of tasks every day. How do you keep yourself updated on different AI updates that come every single day, different language model, which one is doing good? So you're relying 100% on your team. You try to give time by yourself as well. How does it look like?
You know what? I get up early in the morning and I read.
Hmm.
That's the only way to do it. At least in my opinion. So I have a number of newsletters, obviously that I subscribe to that are AI related. There's a number of periodicals for general news, for business news, and then there's some voices that I pay attention to. So, just in general in the world, I think that you've got to be intellectually curious and plugged in, and sort of being able to assimilate all of this information in such a rapidly changing environment.
Any specific newsletter or channel that you'd like to recommend that you really, really like? Like Matt Wolf is my favorite one.
Which one?
Matt Wolf, Matt, there's a YouTube channel called
Oh
Matt
yeah,
Wolf.
yep.
He summarized all the AI information on every Friday in a 20 minutes video with a brief demo of each tool. That's super helpful. So
Oh, I, I love that. I may have to follow it.
I'll share the link with you. I'll share a link with you.
All right, yeah, no, I would appreciate that. No, what do I mean, gosh, I've got so many. What do I listen to? I mean, obviously the TLDRs, but let me hold on. I'll see if I got something there. Um, they usually come in the morning, but let's
Yeah, we
see.
keep reading, but we sometimes don't remember exactly okay who that
I
person.
know, like the AI break, uh, Growth Daily, Forrester. There's some industry stuff that I pay attention to. The automated AI secret. I don't know. I mean, there's just like a million of these things, and I just like sometimes the rundown AI. Sometimes they're you know sometimes they're good and sometimes they're not. You just got to learn how to like kind of parse your way through it until you see something really interesting that you don't know
Yep.
about.
Absolutely. And one final question, like how do you spend your day as a CEO? Like I'm very early in my journey as a CEO of my company with a small team of like 25 people. But I always wonder like, okay, how do CEOs of multi-million dollar companies or billion dollar companies spend their time? So which departments do you focus most on? And how does your week look like? Is your every day is like focusing on specific department, specific team meetings, or do you schedule your week in every day of your week in a different way?
Yeah, I think so. We largely operate around our operating plan, right? So the way we do it is we start out, okay, what do we want to do this year? What are the four big pillars, right? One of them obviously is growth, another one is service, another one's product, another one's financial, etc. And then each one of those functions or pillars always has like one, two, or three like critical things that need to happen, right, on an ongoing basis. And so what we do is we review that operating plan. We review that actually kind of like every day in a scrum, and sometimes we focus on different pieces of it during that day. But every day, I want the leadership and the broader leadership team of the company sort of like operating in a scrum way. Um, like focused on that operating plan, and that way I find like we're always focused on the critical few, like, you know what I mean, you got to be prepared for that meeting, you got to have an update on those three things, right? Because everyone can get busy, and right, I can have 100 things to do in a day, and I don't want people doing 100 things. I want them doing like three things, the three most important things, really well. And so that's a tool that we use to focus the business. um, I think kind of like in thirds, like you want to spend a third of your day with customers or customer facing things, maybe a third of your day on operations and a third of your day on people, something like that.
Awesome. One more question when you talked about people. How do you, when you hire people in the interview process, specifically for very critical roles, what type of questions do you ask or what do you try to evaluate? Because one thing that I have personally seen which I find very challenging is to evaluate if somebody is right for this role in just an hour or 2 hours or one or two interview rounds. So, what's your approach there?
Yeah, I tell you what, this is this is something that I think should be more of a science than it is in an art. And I confess that we're constantly. I've been doing this for a long time, and we're constantly working on doing it better. But I think you're right. I think you need to first identify, is there going to be a cultural fit? And I think many times, I think that's kind of like that. That's almost the easier part. That's like the kind of like the art than the science. You kind of get a vibe. You ask the right questions, and you're going to get a vibe on a person. And then there's the kind of like the can this person do the job that that we want them to do? And I think that here it's really important that projects and testing are important. Um, you gotta know, and especially with this age of AI, I think that anyone could get into an interview and with GPT probably answer all the questions like
Yeah.
relatively well, right? So
Mhm.
at some point you got to test them though. Like, what is it? Are they an engineer? Are they a marketer? Are they a salesperson? Like, you got to test them out in the job that they're going to be doing and really work them hard to see if they can actually do that job.
This is super helpful. That's very very helpful, Brian. Thank you so much, Brian, for your time, for sharing your journey, for sharing about AI in language translation, about Smartling. I'm definitely going to share about Smartling to every founder that I meet in the future to see that they're working in different languages. And I'll share this podcast with many founders that I work with, both from like at a startup level to probably a little bit later stages. But yeah, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
No, it was great talking with you. I really enjoyed the conversation. I'll try and follow up on a couple of these to dos you've given me.
Oh no, I'll definitely send an email summarizing those, but I really appreciate it. I was just very curious about how you are doing these things, right? And at a very high level, when we look from the outside, things like GPT can do everything, but definitely when we talk to an industry specific person, a leader, we
Yeah.
get to know about those small things. And trust me, audience love to see, okay, where it's breaking, how specific tools are doing much better than GPTs. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'll remind you for all the action items. But thank you so
Great.
much for your time.
Yeah. Thanks. It's great talking with you. Appreciate it.
Much for your time.
Yeah. Thanks. It's great talking with you. Appreciate it.